The cover page of One Piece chapter 1112, Hard Aspect, features Yamato making a deal with Kinemon, payment of some sort in exchange for what Yamato would need to do. And based on Yamato's expression, it might have something to do with Oden. And this is described to be a parting gift. So I'm sure the hope of Yamato joining the Straw Hats soon is bound to rise. On Egghead Island, the Marines announced the complete suppression of all pacifista units. But even so, they had no intentions of letting up and continued firing. Under no circumstances could they afford to let the crew of a Yonko escape. The Marines also extended this sentiment towards Jewelry Bonnie. Yet another Mark III unit fell to the ground from woundless cold damage, as a four-legged skeletal silhouette moved elsewhere. While stowing his weapon, Nusjuro reminded himself that Bonnie is only 12 years old. He resented the thought of Dr. Vegapunk giving a child the power to destroy entire countries. It only made the notion of Vegapunk's rebellion all the more ridiculous to the elder. Kashi urged his fellow giants to race back to their ship. Oimo agreed that some really dangerous characters have just made landfall. The cannon fire persisted. More and more of the future island was destroyed. The Marines continued to frantically bark orders. The giant ship from Elbaf on the northeastern shore absolutely needed to be dealt with. Frankie met Vice Admiral Red King in mid-air. Both men refused to back down and prepared their signature fist. And our favorite cyborg had no trouble eliminating the Vice Admiral with a hefty, strong right. This is a great look for Frankie, and hopefully it's enough to raise his bounty a bit. Vice Admirals are supposed to be strong, right? Bonnie told the Giants to look after her father, while she leapt down to face Vice Admiral Pomsky. The Otter Man prepared himself. He refused to let her go any further with access to such powerful weapons. Bonnie's hand made it to Pomsky's worried face, as she told him not to call her father a weapon. Vice Admiral was then turned into a child. Then, she kicked the pint-sized Big Chin Man in the face. Vice Admiral Guillotine cried out for his unfortunate comrade, as this was a terrible sight to behold. We then shift our attention to the Labostratum. Stella finally had his Vega coffee, but wasn't drinking yet. It was way too hot, and he nearly burnt his oversized tongue. While this recording played with 4 more minutes before the big reveal, Vegapunk York brought St. Marcus Mars to the room where it was made. And before Vegapunk York could properly finish her sentence, the destructive Itsumade unleashed a devastating beam attack to get rid of it all. York lifted her hands and urged the Monster Man to calm down and approach things rationally. Even after this attempt, the broadcast continued to play, and their conversation about coffee continued. York explained that if she were Stella, she would have definitely hid the streaming-type transponder snail somewhere else. Hearing that, the Elder decided that the swiftest course of action would be the total destruction of the Labostratum. But York quickly began to tell him that doing something like that would be catastrophic. She explained that Tower B's second floor is dedicated to weapons manufacturing. The first floor is their power plant. Tower C's third floor has a bunch of high-pressure gas cylinders lined up. If that were to blow up, the entire lab would be destroyed along with it. And on the note of weapons manufacturing, wasn't Dr. Vegapunk largely responsible for major breakthroughs in sea stone usage? We've seen the bubble traps fulfill a similar role, but I feel like a bit of sea stone would be great against these 5 nightmare monsters. In response, Mars urged the Vegapunk satellite to think about what her peers would have done, and York was prepared to do just that. She revealed a weapon while speaking of her stacking sins, making it harder for her to join the Celestial Dragons. This is a very peculiar line to me. I need to know more. The reasoning behind York's motivations are still such a mystery. I can't help but wonder if her plan is more elaborate than we think. The Elder suddenly reacted to something. He let her know that he could feel the voice of a small creature somewhere. And I wonder if that's due to some extra ability of some kind, or just a matter of hearing. Surprised, York asked him if it was in Punk Records. She wondered if it might be the transponder snail that they're looking for. Forming a shape with her hands, York explained that the streaming snails were recently developed, and are distinguishable by their triangle-shaped shells. St. Mars commanded Vegapunk York to direct him towards the entryway. From there, they flew elsewhere. Ducey looked up as they departed. She was relieved to see that they were no longer in immediate danger, and that extended to her former comrade Kaku, who was currently being detained inside of a bubble. She's a bit banged up, but it's good to see Stussy again after a number of chapters. The CP's hero agent wondered what the massive monster was. Based on the conversation she overheard, Stussy presumed him to be one of the 5 elders. Kaku agreed with her presumption while shuddering at the thought of the transformation. But now acting a bit more smug, Kaku wondered if his treacherous teammate had been abandoned by her new friends after betraying the world government. As her body trembled, Stussy corrected the Giraffe Man to say that she actually decided to stay on purpose. She insisted that someone needed to take responsibility for this final mission. A mention that confused Kaku. There was a bit of a commotion once the Straw Hats learned that Stussy had been left behind. Edison let them know that the barrier dome needs to go down just as their ship makes its escape, and a request to lower the Frontier Dome could only be made from the command room. The little Vegapunk wondered if being grateful and escaping wouldn't be the right way to return the favor. Nami was all for doing their best to escape, but was still a bit uneasy. Robin was finally awake. She wondered how they would make up for the distance that the Vega Force 1 was supposed to carry them. Edison acknowledged the importance of her concerns, and he actually ran the numbers a bit. Based on his calculations and conventional wisdom, there was no doubt that the ship would crash into the ground, which caused yet another uproar. Usopp interjected and let them all know that the preparations for a coup de burst had been completed. Once Zoro and the others make it back to the ship, they will all super jump elsewhere. It doesn't seem like they'll be very timely with their return, so he would need everyone's help to pull this off. Vegapunk Edison happily laughed. The Straw Hat Pirates were a lot more troublesome than he imagined. He was a big fan of their perseverance, something he believed to always be the source of miracles, even for a scientist like himself. And with that, he suddenly leapt down from above. He planned to make sure that the Thousand Sunny makes it to the water no matter what. He told them all to have faith in him. Meanwhile, he calculated the impending damage to his already beaten body to be 78%. They cried out after him as he crashed down through the laser system. This is an all-or-nothing situation, and Edison refuses to die without a fight. Suddenly, the many surrounding marine ships began to feel a tremendous wind that was pulling them towards the center of the island. St. Jude Peter's worm form was like a massive vacuum cleaner, and a few luckless marines were pulled into his gullet as well. Dory and Brogy mentioned how powerful the monster's suction power was. They were having a really hard time moving forward, and I don't care how strong these powers are. Having the godly suck fruit is not a good look. Luffy was having a hard time too, but pushed himself to resist. He rushed to the side of a nearby building. Seeing that the creature was hungry, Luffy decided to feed it an entire building. He kicked the tower right into the elder's oversized mouth like he was plugging a drain. While the armless elder dealt with that, an exhausted Luffy and his giant friends continued to run away. But just as quickly, Luffy's Gear 5 powers expired, and he entered his exhausted state. Dory was shocked to see Luffy turn into a weird-looking old man. The pirate let them know that the energy he got from the food he ate earlier was all gone now. But if it was food he needed, Brogy wondered if Hakarl would be enough, something that Luffy was not familiar with. Luffy ate it, but the smell was awful. This was fermented shark meat. It's considered emergency food on Elbaf, and although it's stinky, it's also pretty tasty apparently. Either way, it was enough to energize Luffy. The Giants found the simplicity of Luffy's body to be pretty funny, although this newfound energy was not enough for a Gear 5 transformation. Luffy was back to his usual self. But it's nice to receive better clarification that Gear 5 is mostly energy-based like a battery instead of being a matter of time. St. Top Man War Curry was furiously charging in their direction. In response, Luffy summoned a Gear 3rd Fist. He punched the Titanic Hog with Red Rock. This was the very same attack that Luffy used to bring Kaido to his knees at the beginning of their Onigashima assault. But in this case, the result was not so triumphant. Luffy's hand was in terrible pain afterwards. So this pig's durability is even greater than that of Kaido's. These elders are way too strong, man. On the Labostratum, Usopp shrieked in horror. Something was making its way up to where they were. Chopper wondered if it might be a crab, but we all know that these arachnid legs belong to Saint Saturn. And hey, Usopp looks like he's ready for action. These elders are about to learn that Luffy is not the only god they need to worry about on the Straw Hat crew. Meanwhile, on the northeastern shore, the giant responsible for taking care of Kuma had been defeated with a single slash. And this one was not just cold damage, as to ominously stand before the would-be escapees was none other than Nusjuro. And man, this visual is even colder than his sword. We then make our way to Punk Records. Now, there is only 1 minute left before Vegapunk's message to the world about the world. St. Marcus Mars made his approach towards a Den Den Mushi while being in his human form. He mentioned how Dr. Vegapunk could not seem to catch a break. He then callously looked at what was ahead of him. He seems to look up, though it is not the snail that has his attention right now. Despite knowing the purpose of Punk Records, it is perhaps the least explored major location on the island. Besides the broadcast, it'll be very interesting to see what it's like in there. After all, this is Vegapunk's brain. Oda just set up a bunch of cliffhangers. He said that the break was just what he needed, and he is fully prepared to go all out. So I think we can expect some crazy things to come. This was mostly a transitional setup chapter. I mean, even the cover page was set up. But I'm so happy to have the return of One Piece. We still don't know what's up with the ancient giant robot, but I wonder if Luffy leaving Gear 5 will have an effect on it. If you have any thoughts on that or anything else that happened in this chapter, please let us know in the comments. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.